And one of the greatest joys I've had as I became older was the kind of mentorship we talked about before, was building relationships with people through mentorship.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cooking with Creatives. Today I have my friend Deborah Steinglass. I met Deborah when I had a brief job at Music USA. Deborah is an arts leader with 30 years of experience. She's worked at Music USA. She ran this really wonderful jazz gallery that was really important to her career. She is brilliant with people, relationships, and she has a passion for new music. I've invited Deborah on here to just talk a little bit about that and to share her experience with food and culture, and I'm so happy to have her. Deborah, what are we making today?
Oh, Spencer, I'm so excited. This is a favorite trio of dishes in my family. My son, every time he comes home to visit, asks for each one of these things. But it really goes back to my roots, my childhood. My mom is Armenian. There are 3 dishes that are of Armenian origin. The first is a cucumber yogurt soup that's served cold. It's a great summer dish. Think of it as Armenian gazpacho. The second is a salad made with tomatoes and cucumbers, couscous, chickpeas, lemon, and parsley. It's very similar to tabbouleh, and it's actually, this is the one dish that isn't fully authentic. I created this based on the dish tabbouleh. I just wanted to make a variation, and I add the chickpeas to add a little extra protein also. And then the third is Lamb Kufteh. There are many different varieties of Lamb Kufteh, but this particular one is one that we ate when I was a kid growing up all the time. It's similar to, think of it as a cross between a hamburger and a meatball, I guess, but it's highly spiced and cooked in a little bit of tomato sauce. So that's what we're having. Okay, so we're going to make this cucumber yogurt soup. We've already diced up cucumbers, parsley, dill, and garlic, and mint. And we'll put that in the food processor for a while, those items. And a little bit after, we're going to add some yogurt. And I have a story about the yogurt. But first, let's process this. Okay. So now I'm going to add the yogurt, and I use, as I told Spencer, I try to use a yogurt that's very, very tart. When I was a kid, my grandma would come every 2 weeks on the weekends to visit us and stay for the weekend. She lived in the Bronx and we lived in Queens. She'd travel to our home by bus. I think she took 3 buses to get to us. And she'd always bring some special food, and she would also make her own yogurt. So I always look for a yogurt that's really tart, which is similar to Bulgarian and Armenian yogurt. So now I added the yogurt. I also added a mixture of salt, ground coriander seed, and a little bit of pepper. The great thing about this soup is that it's even better that it sit in your fridge for a couple days.
Making sure that you get enough herbs, like the recipe that we've provided, we're not exaggerating on herbs. It really gives it that herbal,
Right.
really freshness that I think that is really the purpose of this type of soup.
Right, and you can use even a little bit more than we had in the recipe. I had a hard time figuring out actual measurements because all of this food is the food that, I made from the time I was a kid. And, you just throw a little bit of this and a little bit of that until it looks right. I also love the simplicity of some of these dishes. You know, I believe really great cooking is more about the quality of the ingredients that you use than almost anything else, and then not being afraid to taste and adjust.
So can you tell me what we're going to be doing next?
Sure. So we're going to be making a salad that I kind of invented. It's very similar to tabbouleh, but tabbouleh uses a whole grain wheat called bulgur. And tabbouleh is done with a very fine ground bulgur that's not always easy to find. So one day in desperation, when I wanted to make a tabbouleh salad for a picnic. These are all really great picnic foods, by the way. I couldn't find the right kind of bulgur, and I went ahead and bought couscous instead, and it turned out it was a huge hit. So it's basically a salad with tomatoes, parsley, Persian cucumber, lemon juice, olive oil, couscous, and I like chickpeas in it as well. There's a little onion. So that's what we're going to have. When you mix everything together, the longer you let it sit, the more flavorful it becomes. So it's, again, a great dish, and so is the yogurt soup to make way ahead of time, even a day ahead. I want to also say that I bought cento chickpeas because you don't have to buy Goya anymore. So there are other versions of canned chickpeas that one can use, and these are actually quite delicious, and they drain out really well. And I'm putting mine in bowl, in another bowl that's larger, that I will be serving this in. And I'm going to mix that together so it's all well integrated. It's such a pretty dish too. It's really colorful.
So I want to know why we mix this up. Can you tell us a little bit about your, professional origin story?
Sure. So I'm a pianist. I did my undergrad as a piano performance major, and I taught for many years. But I have really bad stage fright. I think I'm a really great musician, maybe not a great pianist. And in my early 30s, I became an arts administrator. And I kind of fell into it, but my first full-time job was at the American Music Center running a project called American Music Week. So it was like a kind of a PR project, a lot of public relations where I reached out to radio stations and performing arts organizations all over the country so that we'd have American music programmed in all 50 states during that 1 week period. So I worked on that project and later became the first development director of the American Music Center because it turned out I had a talent for development work. So a lot of my work has been along those lines. I then went to Concert Artists Guild, and then I had my son, and I did consulting work for a long time. And I realized the thing I enjoyed the most about my work in those organizations, and then later as a consultant, was my connection to people. It was the connection to artists. It was, I was an artist, although, not what one would think of as a successful one, but it's sort of in my being, and I want to be around other creators. And so working in the field at smaller to mid-sized organizations where no matter what my job description was, I had those interactions was really important to me. I did consulting work and grant writing for quite a number of years while my son was growing up. And then when I went back to work full time, I ran the Jazz Gallery, which is a small nonprofit jazz venue that's like a major incubator of some of the greatest jazz talents we have today, like Vijay Iyer and Jason Moran, and then of course many younger artists have come up through that space. So that was a great job. Then I came back to basically, you know, my origins and worked at New Music USA for the past 7 years. I became their development director. And again, the work both at the Jazz Gallery, where I had the wonderful opportunity to meet all these amazing jazz musicians, and also to mentor the people who were working at the Jazz Gallery. When I came to New Music USA, that kind of mentorship continued through the work I did with staff. And so, Spencer, that's how we met. And now I'm at a turning point in my career. It's, I've left New Music USA. It felt like it was the right time for me to do that. And I'm thinking about what I want to do next. And some of the plans I had, of course, with COVID-19 were not likely to happen. So I've had some time to think more carefully about what I want to do and how I can use my talents best. And what I realized was actually in a conversation I had with my former boss, Ed Harsh, who said to me, you know, don't forget the thing about you that's really special, besides all the experience you have as an administrator, is your emotional intelligence and your ability to mentor people. And I thought about that a lot the last few weeks especially, and realized that what I really want to do, and the successful consulting work I had done back when my son was growing up, always involved mentoring, even if it was mentoring a founder, executive director of an organization. That's the work I got the most joy from, but it was also the work that I felt was the most productive for the client. You could hire me to write grant proposals, right? I mean, I know how to write a really great grant proposal. But when that work is done, you haven't really learned anything from me. But if I work with you and mentor you through that process that you're going through yourself, that's just one example. The thought process behind how you do that and how you put it together is lasting. And I can also, you know, but that's a very specific thing, but I've also been thinking a lot about artists right now and what their needs are. I had a lot of conversations with people when I was first leaving New Music USA. And what I was hearing from a lot of people is that they had many, many, many projects. You know, artists, we're all like, we're creative people. We're always thinking about, you know, the 25 things that we really want to be doing that would be great. And then add to that our need that we all have to really make an impact in our world right now, in a very rapidly changing society. And I think people are wanting to mix social justice with a lot of the artistic work they're doing, although not everyone is going to do that, nor does everyone have to. But I think that people are feeling, the people I spoke to were feeling overwhelmed. They wanted to do all this work and they didn't know where to start. And I started to think about that and realized that if I were to work with people to help them find that path, right? To help them prioritize, help them decide what steps they need to take to realize their most important project, for example, and then move through those on to the next and the next, that would be really valuable. And it would also help them to, by the questions that I would ask them, they would start to learn a thought process that could be useful to them even later on. So it's a very long, it's very long, but, and then I thought about my own weaknesses. And I felt like one of the things I sometimes need, because I'm a very intuitive person, which is a positive in doing this kind of work, was that I'm not always as structured in my approach to things as I could be. I am very much that way about development work because I've done it for so long and I know what you need to do in order to accomplish tasks. but in some other ways I'm not always. And so I decided that I could use some training to help me create the frameworks for the work I would be doing with people. And so I have signed up for a program at the Coactive Institute. And eventually I'll be going after my certification as a coach. So it's kind of exciting. It's pretty scary. And one of the big obstacles for me was getting over this feeling of it's a certain time in my life and I can't start all over again. I was never that person before, but suddenly I had become that person, and now I realized, no, you've got to do that. You've got to be the same person you've always been, which is someone who takes risks and jumps into the work that they do because that's the work that's in their heart, and that's who I am. I have to follow this almost more than anything else.
Does this look a little bit more herbaceous?
That's beautiful. I think our two dishes look almost the same.
So now it looks like it's time for us to do our lamb. Can you just walk us through how to do that?
Yeah, sure. So this is Lamb Kufteh. It's Armenian style. There are many different kinds of kufta, but this one is again rooted in my childhood. My grandpa, who died when I was very little, was a chef who had his own restaurant. And this was one of the dishes my mom and my grandmother, would make very regularly. We would eat it once or twice a week, the way American kids eat hamburgers. But it's ground lamb. It has some really nice spices in it. What I used today was cumin and black pepper, sea salt, this lovely, lovely spice called sumac that I think, a lot of people don't know about, but it looks like it's really spicy because it's red, but it isn't. It's actually very tart. It has a subtle flavor, but that kind of lemony tartness that it has is wonderful. So that's used quite a bit in Armenian cooking also, so I put a little bit of that in. Yeah, I think the cumin and the sumac are especially important ingredients. So I'm going to put that into the lamb, the ground lamb. It's a pound of lamb. And then my mom always did this. I always loved her kufta because some people make it and it's kind of, because the meat cooks a fairly long time. You don't eat this rare. It's cooked all the way through like a meatball would be. I always liked hers because it had a little bit of a softness to it. So, and I think that the bread creates that, but also a little bit of tomato paste. So just with tomato paste. And then, just like Julia Child used to say, make sure your hands are really clean, impeccably clean, and don't be afraid to use your hands to mix it all up. Here I'm going to show you what it looks like. It's oval, right? But it's tapered at the ends, like that. And this is a pretty big one. It's about 3 inches long.
Can you just tell me a little bit about your background with food and how your relationship with food has affected your own life?
Oh yeah. So I mean, aside from loving eating, which is a great thing, I come from on my mom's side a family of great cooks. My grandpa, as I said earlier, was a chef. I mean, he was an Armenian refugee. His entire family was killed. He hid under a pew and avoided that happening to him during a purge, and was brought here by an uncle who had no children, who brought over a number of his nephews who were refugees, and he set him up in a restaurant. They cooked together. They were both chefs, and so the restaurant was actually the center of my mother's life when she was growing up. She was born here, but Armenia was all she really knew her early years. She, in fact, didn't speak a word of English until she went to kindergarten, even though she was born in the United States. And she told me that she used to go to the restaurant every day after school and do her homework at the restaurant, help set the table, and watch her grandfather and her father cook. That sense of family, home, safety, right? If we think about the history of the family and the safe space that was created around the restaurant and the food and the community that was built, and the support, by the way, of artists as well, because she also told me that her father used to feed the great author William Saroyan, who was young and very poor at the time, and he would feed him dinner for free, but prior to his success in Hollywood, where he wrote some famous screenplays. So I think that sense of the joy that one gets from sharing food, from making delicious food, just carried through my whole life. And when my son was growing up, I really feel that he also gained a sense of that. And because we're kind of a mishmash family, my dad was Jewish, and my husband is Italian. The best way for my son to learn about his heritage was actually through the food. So we used to cook together when he was growing up. This is a dish we made many times together.
It sounds like you had a really, great relationship with your family, but it also seems like, in talking with you, that relationships with, different people that you've worked with throughout your career have been really important and valuable to your journey. Can you talk a little bit about relationships?
Yes. So I'm one of those people, when I was a kid growing up, I had a few friends here and there. I wasn't like a popular kid in elementary school, far from it, same with junior high. But I made lasting relationships. I mean, I have a friend I've known since she sat down next to me in 8th grade math class. We're like sisters. And over the years, I've made those kinds of like deeper connections with people. It's it's kind of an intuitive thing. You just feel that connection to that individual. I feel like the friends that I have and the people I've met through my profession, I'm not necessarily looking for people who think the same way I think, because often they don't, but there's something in their heart that we have in common, and that's what I look for in people, and I think that's how you find lasting relationships. So at work, when I went to the American Music Center, first of all, I had done, actually in my early 30s, and I had some 20 piano students at the time. I had called an old professor of my husband's, actually, and I had taken one course with him, Joel Chataby, and told him, he always thought I should be an arts administrator, and I told him I was interested in doing that. And it was through my connection with him that I kind of made my entry. I had stayed in touch with him for 10 years after I finished college. Through that connection, I had my entry point into eventually the American Music Center. I'm still really close, dear friends with my former boss at the American Music Center, Nancy Carr. I'm friends with uh, another colleague who worked there, Wes York, who for many years later became the administrator of the Aaron Copland Fund for Music. I believe in making connections with people, even at work, that are personal as well as professional. And I think it's important to not be afraid to do that. I mean, you don't want to waste your work time on personal stuff, but I sometimes feel like I don't fully understand the idea that if you let people know who you are, if you let them into your life in other ways, that's somehow unprofessional. I don't believe that. I think it's important to connect that way. And I also, and it's ageless. So I've met all these people along the way, and built relationships. And one of the greatest joys I've had as I became older was the kind of mentorship we talked about before, was building relationships with people through mentorship as well. And getting, and always focusing on the human side, right? So a value that I hold actually as a boss is that we're all human and we make mistakes. I never want someone to be afraid to come into me and say, oops. And sometimes, I mean, I've had some people come in and tell me some doozies. I feel like my role as their boss is to solve the problem with them, not to berate them. And I just, you know, my door is always open. And I think as a result of that, I have these really important, to me, they're really important, powerful relationships that transcend age. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I feel incredibly, people use the word privilege a lot now in a very negative way. But I've had the privilege of working with some really, this is positive, right? Really, really enormously wonderful human beings, fascinating, fabulous artists. I've seen people I worked with bloom and grow. I sometimes had to and I don't mean let go in a bad way, I've sometimes had to let people go in the sense of allowing them to grow and move on where they needed to, and encouraged them to do that. Which, you know, when you put good people out into the world, you're doing some great stuff. And so we know some of those people together. But I'm thinking also about my friend Rafik Bhatia, who worked with me when he was kind of straight out of Oberlin College and came to the Jazz Gallery and did some projects for us there. And then when I went to New Music USA, he came and was a member of the development team for a while. And at a certain point, much sooner than Ed or I expected, although we expected his music career to take off, he had a tremendous opportunity to become part of Sunlux, and was going on a tour and was trying to figure out how to keep his job at New Music USA and do this tour at the same time. And, you know, it was a hard decision actually for me because I really liked him personally, but that wasn't going to work. And we set him free, I think, in a way that enabled him to make the leap that he needed to make. But we were able to do that because we had a genuine, I mean, we're still friends. We had a real relationship. So it's just super important to me. It's kind of the focus of my life is, lots of people talk about this, people on their, not that I'm thinking about dying, I'm going to be around a long time, but people on their deathbeds often say that the thing that was most important were the they wished they had spent more time with their family, or they wished they had spent more time with their friends. They don't say, I wish I had spent more time in my office, right? Or I wish I had, if you're a development person, I wish I had won that grant. I mean, the stuff that you come back to is the quality of the relationships and the people that you've impacted in the world. As a parent, I feel like the most difficult job I ever did was being a parent and trying to be a good one. And it's the best job I ever had. And so it's just like, that's just how I operate in every aspect of my life. I'm going to add the tomato sauce now.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing. I think these look beautiful, though, I will say.
Mine came out really good. I can tell already.
So now we're plating our lamb and our couscous. I think that I'm so excited to eat this. It just looks and smells so fragrant. If you haven't made lamb before, like, I highly recommend trying. It's just, I feel like it's an underutilized protein.
This is, you know, the other thing is that this recipe, dare I say this, you can actually make it with other things. It doesn't have to be lamb, but it's better with lamb. Everything's better with lamb.
As we finish plating this up, can you just tell us where people can get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your future consulting work?
Sure. So because this is so new, and I'm kind of, I'm figuring out the way I want to communicate about all of it. I haven't yet had a website designed, but you can find me on LinkedIn or on Facebook. You can put in a request to connect with me on Facebook, and just, you know, sort of, I'll assume that you're okay. Yeah.
Great.
I also think probably there are a lot of people I'm already connected to who might.
Great.
Wait, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, great, wonderful. Please, if you are interested in her work, go check that out. Can you share us with what your dish looks like?
Mm.
And there's mine. Oh, that's really, really delicious. I'm so happy to be eating this again. It's so fragrant, it's so flavorful, and it's very homey and the type of thing that I'm gonna feel very comfortable for the rest of the evening. And so thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for sharing this recipe with me. If you really liked this video, please subscribe to the channel, like the video. If you decide to make this recipe, please post pictures of this below in the comment sections. And anyways, enjoy the rest of your day. So.
Yay! It was wonderful.